in my home office. It's a little area that I produce my tackle box ID products and do the shark ID workshop stuff in.
Perfect. Well, we're recording, so let's get this party started. And we're back. Here I am, Fly Navarro, and I am being joined today by Mr. Eric Saunders. Eric, how are you today?
I'm well. How are you? It's nice to meet you.
It's nice to finally meet you. I know we've talked a couple times on the phone and texting back and forth. And so before we get into the crazy shark stuff, I want to ask about this tackle thing you were talking about. You said you build tackle something in your
Yeah,
workshop?
business I started in 2010. The state of Florida is one of the most populous for fishing. With so many people coming to fish, and they don't know what they're catching. Uh, I know my sharks, and one of the local fishing piers allowed fishermen to target sharks off the pier, but they had a problem knowing what kind of species they were. So I just put together a quick little card of the different species of sharks and the key features on how to identify them.
Okay.
Took him to the pier, and he said, "That's all well and good, but what we need is something else. We need it for the regular fish too." So that was the birth of the fish identification card and tackle box ID. This is small enough that it fits into your tackle box.
Okay.
So that's my business is tackle box ID, and I started with that line of cards and went into a line of larger cards.
Oh, wow.
Fishermen to identify the fish they're catching, and know the rules associated with them, the FWC rules. Now, this is adaptable for other states too. I do produce it for other states. And then I got distributorship, and one of my distributors said, "Well, we need a new kind of a folding ruler, the traditional three-section folding ruler." And he said a new kind. So I looked around, did a lot of research, took a lot of photographs, and I developed my Superflex fishing ruler.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And it's Superflex because it's super flexible.
Yeah. Us fishermen are notorious for breaking shit.
Yep, this you can't break. And it's double-sided. And there's a ton of information off of here, and that took off. And then uh, there were a few dropouts from the companies that were producing the hard ruler that people know about.
Yep.
Outbound. I think that mine is only the second of the traditional hardtack ruler produced in Florida.
Wow. Okay. I've seen those, man, I've seen those all over the place.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's
So
good to know.
that is Tackle Box ID.
All right. Now let's take a couple steps even further back and let's talk about your background in general.
Grew up on the river, on the Halifax River in South Daytona, had a passion for the water and had a passion for sharks. I mean, what boy doesn't have an interest in sharks when he's on the river all the time? Now, the Halifax River is a saltwater estuary. We have all kinds of fish in it, and we did get sharks. And so it was really cool growing up there. My seventh grade science fair project was all about sharks, and it was very rudimentary. It had the encyclopedia at that time, didn't have all the stuff that we have now. So
I
I'm
remember an encyclopedia.
media and getting books and stuff. I had a book, Shark Fishing by Frank Mundus, and I just poured
Oh,
the kid. It
how
was just
awesome is that?
incredible, and that was just my passion. So that was when I was a kid. Throughout school, I always had a bend towards the marine sciences. I went to the University of South Florida, graduated with a BA in natural science, no specific thing. I was tired of school and just wanted to get out of there. And I ended up falling into the fishing business down in Ponce Inlet. Ended up being a third mate deckhand on the fishing vessel, the Snow White 3, out of Ponce Inlet with Captain Lee Carver.
Okay.
And got started in the fishing business. And one thing led to another. We did some commercial fishing trips. on the smaller six passenger vessels and just a lot of different stuff like that. Got a bite, I got bitten by the bug for fishing, and uh, I saw an opportunity to go off on my own commercial fishing. Um, Traditionally, it's always been snapper and grouper and king mackerel in this area. And so I started off that way. And then I I followed my passion, and I learned that NOAA Fisheries was actually encouraging fishermen to target shark species as a viable form of seafood rather than the groupers that there were. I think that at that time, the grouper population in the Gulf was in trouble. This was the early 80s. And so NOAA was encouraging people to ease off the pressure on the grouper and go to alternate species. That's around the same time monkfish came into the marketplace up in the Northeast. And so I went that way. Who would not want to go try a new thing called shark fishing?
Yeah.
My brother and I purchased a 32-foot boat. We fitted it out. Our first long line was borrowed line and borrowed hooks, and we did about quarter of a mile of line. And I
Okay.
built a little wooden spool, and we pulled it by hand and rolled it up on the. I mean, we started from the very basic, and we had a blast. We started in 1983, the latter part. There was nobody shark fishing here in the area full time. There were transient boats that would come through, some really big ones, and they were fishing really big scale for the sharks offshore, but nothing here out of the port. So for 1 or 2 years, we were the only shark boat in the area commercially fishing sharks. We developed connections for the market to take the fish to the seafood market. We went through all the steps to go directly to restaurants where they featured it on their menu. Um, take a bite out of a shark or take a bite before he bites you, that kind of a thing. They promoted it. Shark Bites was bar food on the countertop, and it was just a blast. It was loads of fun.
That's yeah, it's amazing that Noah was pushing it considering their 180-degree face right now.
Well, what happened was within 3 years in this area, there were, I will say 15, there might have been more, 15 vessels fishing sharks just in Ponce Inlet. And I would say 15 to 20 in the years after that, through the 86 to 87, 89 period, because it was a good market, and there were two products that we could sell off of the shark with the meat and the fins. And so it was easy. If you had the right gear, you could do it. There were a lot of sharks in the area. I didn't have to go far. I like fishing just right off the beach until the state closed state waters to commercial shark fishing. It was really cool. You could see the people on the beach, and then you're catching 10-foot dusky sharks. Just right off.
People have no clue how close all them sharks are.
Uh, so yeah, it was a blast. It was even with that many people fishing sharks, the market still took all of the product. It shipped from Florida, and this was repeated almost in almost every port in Florida: Jacksonville, St. Augustine, Canaveral, on down Port Salerno. Port Salerno was huge for gill-danding sharks, and all around up the West Coast, Madeira Beach, all those places. All of that shark product went up into the rest of the states. Our product shipped out to Utah, Colorado, Chicago, all kinds of places. Canada, a lot of it went to Canada. So it was a really growing industry for a while.
Yeah, it's I would say probably in that late 80s, early 90s is when the campaign started changing um, to push down shark meat and shark fishing in general. Um, That was the very, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you were doing it then, but looking back, you can start seeing as people were trying to change people's perception of sharks and the need to protect them.
There was even before that. I remember going to a symposium over at Mote Marine Laboratory. Dr. Robert Huter put it forth. There was a real, see, I'm here in New Smyrna, in the Volusia County area, Daytona, Ponce Inlet, New Smyrna Beach. We are the shark bite capital of the world, right? We have the highest per capita percentage of shark bite incidents anywhere in the world. And we're 33 years running consecutive with this you know, title. The conception in the news media has always been shark attacks. These sharks are attacking humans. And so the symposium we went to was put together to just help educate the media that these are not attacks, they're bites. Because the ones that are occurring most around Florida are actually investigative bites on a prey item that's actually too large for the shark to take advantage of. The shark that does the biting here in the New Smyrna area is the blacktip shark. And it doesn't have the tooth structure nor the feeding habits to tear really large chunks off of a prey item like a bull shark does. They will, but it's not their normal thing. If they go after crabs and shrimp and fish and things like that. Now the bull shark is the one that will finish what it starts. That's that big jaw behind me. And that's the ones where it have major catastrophic damage and even fatalities. But that could be considered an attack. But ours are just investigative bites. The shark bites a potential prey item and releases it, but meanwhile the damage is done. The surfer has moved, the swimmer has jerked, and those sort of things. Yeah, some of the bites that we have are fairly serious, but most of them are quite minor with just a few stitches required. But that symposium put together tried to educate the news media on how to talk about these shark bite incidents. They're not attacks. That was a very negative connotation throughout the state of Florida for tourism. We're a huge tourism state, and if there's all these shark attacks going on, well, it's going to stop tourism. During that meeting, there were people there proposing, and this was mid 80s, 85, 86, to stop shark fishing, protect the sharks. Even then, I don't know if it was, I forget who it was, Greenpeace or some others. There were some other organizations that had already formed against this to really curtail the industry. And then throughout the fishery, when I participated, every now and then reports would come out about how dangerous it was to consume shark as a food because of the high mercury contents that are contained in it. Well, there was never a mention of high mercury contents in swordfish, tunas, large groupers, large snappers, any older fish that spent time years in the water is going to absorb and absorb that mercury. But they never mentioned along with the mercury is a high value of selenium that helps the body process the mercury out and get rid of it. So there was always several times I remember sales were good, and then all of a sudden they decreased because somewhere these articles would come out to try to depress the fishery. So there was a lot of pressure to stop it even early on, but it
Yeah, it's
really snowballed in the later years. But
they still push that mercury um, claim, but like you said, tuna and swordfish is just as high. And the biggest thing is don't eat it 7 days a week. You can eat it 2 or 3 times a week and you'll be fine.
Well, it's like king mackerel. King mackerel can be very high in mercury, and people love to go trolling along the beach in the late summer for these smoker 40, 50, 60 pound, 40, 50 pound kings. Those things are have enough mercury for a thermometer. Active in what you're eating, uh, in any species that you have. If you're going to consume seafood, go for the smaller fish. Go for the 6, 7, 8 pound king mackerels, the smaller guys, or the smaller groupers, not you know not the big old black bellies that have spent a lot of time.
Eating
So
everything.
yeah,
No, it's been a huge media campaign on from the environmentalists, and I'm very particular in the words I use when it comes to that. I really try to a conservationist, I believe, is somebody that wants to use a resource and conserve it, where an environmentalist or a preservationist wants you to just avoid the resource altogether.
right.
And it's a resource. And one of the campaigns that been very successful at is humanizing the sharks.
Uh-huh.
And it's an argument I've been on HMS now for 12 years, where they have a coloring contest about shark. And listen, if it wasn't for sharks, I don't know if I would have gotten into fishing. I fell in love with fishing because of sharks. I
Yeah,
love sharks. And
yeah.
I get such a bad rap online that I'm pushing for shark kill tournaments and killing of sharks. And that's not my thing. My thing is it's a resource that needs to be managed, and our government has not managed it properly.
They tried it. They attempted to. It's a very difficult thing. You're looking at a family of fish that have a very unique reproductive history, and it's hard to get a grasp on that. The NOAA Fisheries and HMS has done. They worked really hard at doing it, and um, it was to get a grasp on what was actually being harvested was one thing through the commercial system, and all means bycatch and the recreational harvest, and then each species has to be managed on its own because not all sharks are the same. Some sharks mature at 3 years or 4 years, like the Atlantic sharknose. Other sharks don't mature until they're 25, like maybe a sandbar or a bull shark or a big hammerhead. So they're so each species is so unique. You can't put them in the same group like collectively, like maybe snappers or groupers.
Yeah, I think that's where, for lack of a better term, I might want to use the word laziness because of the fact that people just say sharks, but there's a lot of species of sharks. And when you start managing bluefins and yellowfins, or blue marlins and white marlins, sharks come into tens of different kinds of sharks. There's a lot of sharks. There's small coastal, there's large coastal, there's pelagics. There's so many different kind of sharks, and there needs to be stock assessments for all of them so you can make proper management decisions on it.
That's true. Yeah, and so each one has to be treated differently and uniquely, because uh, this there's one species here, the Atlantic sharknose. It's different than the other sharks in that its reproductive cycle is yearly. The other sharks, the reproductive cycle is bi-yearly. Every 2 years, the female will drop pups when she's mature. The sharknose, as soon as it drops pups, it mates and is mature again, or pregnant again. So those are very reproductive. That has a very high reproductive potential. So those sharks can sustain more fishing than the other species of sharks. There's one species of shark, the sand tiger. It reproduces every other year, so every 2 years for a cycle, but it produces only two pups during that one cycle. That reproductive potential is super low. That has to be managed entirely different than the other species, than the shark nose. So, yeah, it has. You have to have a unique species by species approach to it.
Yeah. The hot topic lately has been the sandbars.
Right.
The sandbar, we were just talking about it this past week. Um, and I believe I might be off in my years, 2013, that they put a moratorium on them, and then now they're going under reconsideration. And that's something that there was quite a bit of argument, or not, let me not say argument. There was quite a bit of discussion about Noah's really good at putting sharks on list, but they're not good at taking them off.
It's I guess it's better to be overly cautious than react too quickly. I don't know the deal behind that. The restrictions on the sandbar came about long after I got out of the industry. I fished sharks from 1983 to 1998,
Okay.
and I switched hats and started working for the state of Florida Fish and Wildlife Research after that. But so I
So
was long out of the industry by the time that happened.
So let's talk a little bit about that when you went to work for the state. Again, I'm from the state of Florida. I grew up here. Um, I, I paid attention to everything that FWC, or back then it was, uh, I can't even remember. Was it FWC then? And now
With the EP.
what's that?
It's the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, kind of
Mm,
that. But
yeah.
the people in charge of the fisheries wasn't really FWC. It was DEP.
Okay.
So I started uh, fishing had along about 97, 98. Fishing was starting to get really difficult. NOAA Fisheries had actually cut quotas for the different species of sharks that we could have. So there was a aggregate of the large coastal sharks and then quotas for the small coastal shark aggregate. And they closed, they reduced the quotas. And I think that a lawsuit was filed and found that they were incorrect in that, to put it kindly. Uh, but it was harder for me to make a living catching sharks. Um, when the large coastal sharks were closed, which is the type of sharks that I targeted black tips because they were so close to the beach and I could get them in large numbers. And if I had to, then I went for the sandbars. I could do two trips on black tips when my colleagues would do one trip on sandbars. So I like to go closer to home and be home quicker without having to do long runs. Uh, it was harder for me to go fishing when they closed large coastals. I switched over to small coastal shark fishing. I targeted the sharp-nosed shark. I could get them in big numbers, but it was a tremendous amount of work for a lot lower value. And so I was looking to transition away from shark fishing full time. And my deckhand went on to be hired over in St. Pete by NOAA Fisheries, in of all places, HMS. And he was so they actually hired my deckhand who had deck experience as a shark fisherman, so he knew what he was talking about rather than theoretical experience, you know. But he told me about an opening that was coming up. The DEP was going to start fisheries surveys, recreational fisheries surveys, statistics collection at along every coastal county. And the New Smyrna, my area, was one of them. And so I was like, raised my hand, tell me who I need to talk to get that job. And I got hired to be a regional coordinator, supervise the Volusia to Jacksonville, Fernandina Beach area for what was then known as the Marine Recreational Fishing Statistics Survey Program, MRFS. And so we were trained in MRFs, and those are basically what they call now dockside intercepts. We go to a fisherman that's exiting the water, exiting the fishing area, and ask them about their fishing day, what they caught, what they released. If they have fish, then we attempt to take lengths and weight measurements on the fish that they do have, all in a very statistical manner. Part of that collection is actually the accurate identification of all species of fish so that they're being recorded properly. It's fairly easy to tell one snapper from another, but when you get to the sharks, not everybody knew how to tell the sharks apart. Uh, we were given books to look things up in for species identification. And one of the books we were given, I don't have an example of it right here, is was the fish of north of the Gulf of Mexico. And in the section for sharks, they had uh, illustrations, they had photographs of taxidermy mounts up on the wall that were badly painted. And as they're telling you this is what this particular shark looks like. No way you're going to get an accurate identification from that. Now, what I'll say is that I got into identifying or teaching about shark identification because back when I was fishing, uh, I was a friendly platform, let's say, for scientists and researchers and law enforcement to get information from regarding species of sharks. And so I got into the thing about teaching how to identify one species of shark from another. And so that led down a path, especially with law enforcement. Law enforcement had no clue what species of shark they were looking at, especially when it came in the commercial industry with the head removed, the fins off, the tail gone. There's just this log or carcass, they call it. So I began teaching how to identify each species by the carcass. And through teaching that, I became more proficient at it, but I wrote identification materials for that, teaching the fishermen, teaching the law enforcement people what they're looking at. If they understand what they're looking at, they're not going to harass the fishermen like we had some officers do here, uh, charging people with illegal species when they didn't know what they had. So the education of the officers was, in my mind, was critical to helping us all work in this industry. And so that was the beginning of my teaching shark identification. And we did a number of things. They even gave me an exempted fishing permit to go fishing and bring in as many sharks as I can or could and keep the fins. And then we would meet up at the dock, and there were 30 officers there from DEP, the old Fish and Game Commission. NOAA Fisheries had agents, special agents, and investigative agents. We had people from other states, Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina came down. We all met on the dock, and we just had this big day-long seminar on how to identify one shark from another. And I started writing those materials down, and I created flowchart systems on how to identify sharks. It's much like a dichotomous key in the science field, but it's more like a decision tree. Okay, if your fish has this or this, if it has that second feature, go look at the next one. And so we use that kind of a thing. And my deckhand, who went on to be in NOAA Fisheries, was in on some of those experiences where we taught fishermen and taught law enforcement how to identify the species. Um, when he got over into and it got established in his position at NIMS, this was several years after he got established in 2005 or six. He hit me up and he said we kept in contact. We're good friends. He said, "Man, we're going to start this program. We're going to begin a workshop on for seafood dealers who have the shark dealer permit to train them how to identify the sharks because the data that's coming in is just says shark. It doesn't list the species." So we worked back and forth, and I developed a curricula and resource materials for this workshop for NOAA Fisheries. And I was fortunate to lead this workshop from 2006 or seven up until just last year when I left the program. I was an independent contractor to NOAA Fisheries. I did 12 workshops a year across the nation from Boston to Galveston, Texas. And seafood dealers who had the shark dealer permit would come and receive this training. In fact, the training was required for those who had the federal shark dealer permit. And part of the curricula was an identification manual on how to identify the sharks.
Wow.
It included flow charts on how to identify the carcasses of the different species, whether it was ridge sharks or not. So it's a full booklet. This is a booklet that was taught in the workshop, and then it was condensed into a laminated sheet,
A single page.
a full page, 2 pages, ridge sharks and non-ridge sharks. So you can see it's a decision tree, how to identify. It's really easy to do. So it's just for the layperson, and it was really cool. So that's what I taught for 19 years across the Eastern Seaboard. When we started, there were 332 some shark dealers that were permitted to purchase sharks off the fishing vessels, and they would turn in trip tickets about their purchases off the boats. When I left the program last year, there were 85. So many fish houses just gave up their federal dealer permit and not bothering handling sharks at all
Why do you think that is?
because of changes in the regulations in the fishery. When I first started shark fishing, there were no regulations. It was wide open. But soon after that, within a couple, 3 years, the NOAA fisheries recognized that this thing was exploding almost out of control. Like I said, there were 15 or 20 boats here in the Ponce Inlet area alone, but both sides of the inlet, all harvesting sharks exclusively, and that effort was multiplied across the state. So the impact on the shark populations was huge, tremendous take. And then they started recognizing there might be more sharks being harvested than what's actually they're reproducing. Because even though there's a lot of area out there and there's a lot of sharks, it's still a finite number. And if you start dipping out of this finite number, all this tremendous harvest, with their low reproductive potential, the potential for diminishing the populations is really high. And they started to see reductions in some of the species, like the dusky shark up in the Northeast. Those sharks, the numbers dropped really quickly. And then some of the hammerheads started dropping quite quickly in the numbers if they had good data. So that was part of the decline. And then it was the even further tightening of the industry. First, we went to those that had a directed fishing permit could harvest 32 or 33 large coastal species. And then, that really restricted the harvest. So I could go fishing. Now, this has happened after my time, but I'd go, I could go fishing and harvest only 32 of the large coastal sharks per trip. Now, per trip doesn't mean per day, it's per trip. So what some of the guys would do is they'd go set gear just outside the state line, haul in 32 fish, take it to market, go back out and clean off the rest of their gear and do that until they'd clock it until they pulled in their entire line. So the diminish of the amount of product, the closures, there were closures once the quotas for large coastal sharks were met, they would close the fishery. And I think that did more damage than anything in the market, because if you have a grocery chain like Publix or Winn-Dixie or Food Lion that want to carry shark, and it's running good, and all of a sudden it's not available due to a closure that maybe a 4 or 5 month closure, and then it starts up again and it's open for 3 or 4 months. That's a problematic thing for them to carry. They're not going to carry it quite as much. So they stopped carrying it in the food chain, in the grocery store chains. So the supply diminished, and so the actual consumers, the stores, the retailers reselling it, they diminished as well. In my opinion, this is all my supposition, but
Yeah.
and then there were campaigns like the Mercury campaigns to try to diminish it, those kind of things. And fishermen found it was not worth it to stay in the fishery. The prices for the meat really never changed. Um, uh, my prices held fairly steady at anywhere between 40 and 60 cents a pound for the meat. Almost all of us that fish sharks made our gravy on the sale of the fins. Those fin prices got up around $32, $33 a pound to the boat, and
Wow.
then it got passed on. Yeah, so the fins were really what everybody was going for.
I I think they still go for the fins.
Yeah, well, Senate Bill 1106 passed 2, 3 years ago, has eliminated the sale of shark fins in the United States, and I think that was a real nail in the coffin to the industry. That was done with no science involved, only a feel good attitude. Um, Almost all one political party signed on, and it was just like save the sharks kind of an issue with no science behind it, and that really hurt it. So fishermen now, if they want to participate in the shark fishery, can harvest sharks. NOAA Fisheries is allowing them to harvest even more than they used to be able to harvest, but the fisherman still has to discard and throw away the most valuable part of that fish, which is ridiculous.
It's funny because I just pulled it up here on my computer because I was at NOAA this week. Um, they're proposing Amendment 16, and they're part of Amendment 16 is doing a review on shark fishery. And um, main result number one, commercial shark fishery decline in the use of available quota, the number of participants, and markets. Uh,
But
there's, go ahead, please.
first off, it starts with the ability of the fisherman to be able to sell his product, and um, to eliminate the the ability to use the most valuable resource off of that fish, the most valuable product off of that fish, without any scientific or data behind it, makes no sense. That's what's um, you know pretty bad. Yeah, meat prices have come up a little bit, but you might get north of $1 on product now, but it just irks fishermen. It would irk me to no end to have to throw away the most valuable part of that fish when there was no reason behind the thing at all. No,
Could before you go on, I would like for you to go in depth for people that are unaware of how the rule is set, because there's two rules that are competing against each other that you have to come to the dock with all your fins naturally attached.
you have to come to the dock with your fins naturally attached. This is put in place years ago to stop the finning problem. Fins were so valuable that fishermen would remove the fins and then discard the sharks. It wasn't really large scale, but in the early days, we were allowed to have 5% of our catch, five, our fins. Let me get it this way: 5% of our carcass weight could be in fin weight. So we were under the 5% rule. Well, what happened is that there was no market for large hammerheads. Many of the other sharks weighed in at when you took the fins off, weighed in at 2.8 or 3.2% of the carcass weight. The 5% was estimating if you had all sandbars in your catch, that is actually 4 or 5%. So we could slide in a few large hammerhead fins sets into our catch, discard the hammerhead meat because it spoils very quickly because of the high urea in its blood. There's no market life, there's no market for it, there's no shelf life on hammerheads. So we could discard these big hammerheads and have a few extra fins. And then the fins became so valuable, $32, $33 a pound, the fishermen would go out and they'd have a big catch of sharks and maybe cap off or get their quota on their limit on the sharks, and then they would just clean up the rest of the line and probably fin a few and bring them in. There were quite a few cases like that, and but to have to discard 100% of the most valuable part of the fish is crazy. And what gets me is it was all like feel good butterflies and hug the trees kind of a thing. The legislators probably felt that they were doing a good thing, but they really put put the screws to the industry and to basically shut it down. People decided they're not gonna go out there for 55 head or 30, whatever it was. Right now it's 55 head of large coastals is what they can, non-sandbar large coastals is what they can have. It's just not worth it. That's a lot of work. You got to bring the shark to the dock. You've got to carry all this extra weight, offload all this extra weight. When you get it to the dock, you have to retrim it to take off the belly sections, trim off the pectoral fins, take off the tail. That's easy, but the rest of it, and then discard that stuff. We're going to discard it. You can't dump it in the water at the dock. That violates the Clean Water Acts or whatever we have around here. You can't have all that offal dock. You put it in the dumpster. Well, might be a day or two before the trash pickup is. That's going to smell pretty good. It's just too much trouble. And I mean, there's a few examples where it still works really well for some local people, but there's one guy here in town that does extremely well. He goes and catches his large coastal sharks, trims them. He owns a seafood market. He trims them at the seafood market, so he retails the shark product there, and he also has a kitchen. He also has a restaurant that the product goes in directly into. So it's worth it for him.
I lost your audio. Eric, hold on one second. I lost your audio. I don't know what happened. I lost your audio. Uh, Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, just a little bit of technical difficulty, but we figured it out. All right, you were in the middle of talking about the gentleman that has the fish market. He catches his own sharks, he processes everything, and he sells it right to the public. That's what you were in the middle of.
Also sells it. He also sells it in a restaurant as well. A very popular restaurant, and he serves it quite a number of ways. And it's a wonderful product. So he has found a niche to do that. Now, quite a number of other fishermen, in my experience of teaching the shark identification workshop for shark dealers, quite a number of other fishermen, commercial shark fishermen, um, took the workshop and applied to have the shark dealer permit themselves so that they could do the same thing. So essentially, on the boat at sea, they're harvesting the shark as a fisherman. When they step ashore at the dock, they become their own dealer rather than selling to some fish house. They become their own dealer and they part it out. They either fillet it out or part it out to different places, restaurants or markets. And so it requires a lot of extra work on the part of the fishermen to disperse the product that way. But I have quite a number of people here, guys I know in this area, just not going to mess with it anymore because it's too difficult. Um, it's not worth the time and effort to, and especially just makes them mad having to throw the fins away.
I, for me, it's, I hate using this word, but I'm gonna use it. To me, it's the most disgusting thing in the world because in the state, not just the state of Florida, any state, I'm also a hunter. So if I go out and I shoot an animal and I leave meat there, I can be fined.
Sure.
You are required to use every available piece of that animal. And
Well,
here we are with the most valuable piece, and the legislation has legislated to throw it away. And
yeah,
that's the quotas are there. We're not catching the quotas. Listen, if the quota says the shark can sustain this kind of pressure or management, let them sell the most valuable part of the shark.
Let them be able to eliminate wanton waste. I think the word is wanton waste.
That's exactly the word.
Throw away, the most valuable part of the fish, and that's that's the crux of it. And there was NOAA Fisheries has worked for a long time to try to address this shark finning issue, the issue of discarding sharks by and removing the fins and discarding the sharks. They worked so hard to do that and to establish quotas for the different things. There's 40 years of shark regulations, and the Senate, the House as well. It takes the House and the Senate to pass the bill. The House passed it early. The Senate was the final one to do it about a year and a half later. Um, to enact without any science behind it at all is just ridiculous. And I think that the only way that we can get around this or to have it changed is through an executive order. Somebody needs to get with President Trump's caddy on the golf course, whisper in his ear that they need to further address this atrocity against the commercial fishing industry and have him do an executive order to reverse the shark fin ban. It's now a statute, okay? About the only way that it can be reversed is through an executive order. You're not going to be able to go up against the Senate, lobby these senators who voted for it. No, executive order is going to be what it has to. He's done that for the fishing industry, for the shrimp industry, and everything else, and he needs to further address this in the small world of the shark fishery to help cull the populations, if you want to say, if there is overpopulation going on, but to stimulate the economic impact generated by the shark fishing industry. It'd be a stroke of a pen. He could reverse it, and it would change the fishery altogether. If the fisherman is allowed to take advantage of the most valuable part, we have a sector of the fishery called the shark research fishery. 8 or 10 guys are selected each year to have a permit to go out and target large coastal sharks, carry a scientist with them, and they can harvest above and beyond what the trip limit is for that particular fishery, and then take all the scientific data. Right now, if they go catch a large catch of sandbar sharks or whatever else they catch, they have to throw the fins away. They can't keep the fins either. And so it's so egregious. I, as an instructor for NOAA Fisheries, carried around shark fins in my workshop kit. At each workshop, I talked about the shark fins, what their use was, and what the demand was for them. So I had examples of shark fin. I had to carry a letter with me from NOAA Fisheries saying I was allowed to have those in my possession as I traveled to these different states to to teach. So it
Wow.
wasn't directly allowed under the language of the Senate Bill 1106.
And it's funny because, first of all, as American fishermen, commercial fishermen, we are the most regulated fishery in the world.
The most. There was
By
there was
far.
there was no need to establish a ban on the sale of shark fins because NOAA Fisheries had worked for a very long time and law enforcement cracked down on this finning that had been going on to the point where it was almost non-existent. They hadn't found any cases. And then to come out with this, all of that money, time, and effort spent behind these changes and regulations and enforcing them was made, null and void by the stroke of a pen, basically.
And man, they just snuck that in the omnibus bill to boot. It was
Yep,
never debated. It was just put in the 2021 defense budget bill.
yep.
And next thing you know, ta-da, we got a
So
new law.
those of you who have a know, Executive orders a way to go. If he can get the ear of President Trump, he will. If it's anything to do with the America's commercial fishermen and expanding their ability to utilize all of their product, I think he's all for it, and he would be behind it. It just has to reach his ear.
You know, it's funny you say that because he's already signed one executive order saying that we have to do everything in our power to rebuild the commercial fishing industry in the United States.
This would go hand in hand with that. He can't. It can't be denied.
Yeah.
It fits that exactly. And that's the only way to go. Filing an amendment in Congress, reversing it, none of that's going to happen. That
It'll it'll
they
take too long.
could do it on a pen stroke, and be everybody could be fishing again tomorrow. They could be selling. There's still a high demand for fins in China, not as much as it used to be, not as much as it used to be, but there still is a demand.
I travel all over the world. I mean, all over. And I see shark fin soup everywhere. It didn't stop the demand. It
No,
just stopped U.S. fishermen from selling it.
the Bahamas can sell it.
Yeah.
I don't think shark fishing is legal in the Bahamas, but I
No.
mean every other country can still harbor sharks and sell their fins.
Yeah. No, I had a couple months ago, I had somebody from the Small Business Administration on the podcast. And when I first met him, he asked me, my personal opinion about this problem here, because when he was appointed by the administration was to help rebuild the commercial industry, and he goes, I just don't understand this whole shark fin thing. And I said, listen, it didn't stop the demand. It just stopped that we can't sell it. So what you've done is it's simple supply and demand. That guy in Indonesia, and I'm not picking on anybody in Indonesia, I just using this country per se, he's allowed to fin. He can chop off the fins and throw the shark away. Well, where you guys were getting $30 a pound, now it's doubled because now they don't have American fishermen to compete against it. And it wasn't 10 days after I spoke with him, I was in Dubai and right there on the menu was shark fin soup.
There you go.
Yeah. It's still there, you know. So all you've done is you've hampered the US fishermen. That's all, like you said, it's a feel-good story.
Yeah, that's all. It's a feel good story. The the shark huggers love it.
Oh.
Uh, they're of that type that absolutely no harvest is good. Um, they would prefer no harvest of anything. That probably would go to the days of Sully and Green. Anything, and just here we go.
But and my so and again, I don't want to pick on anybody in particular. We have somebody on HMS. She's there supporting the sharks and shark conservation. I was really feeling bad because every time she would say something about a proposed bill or a proposed regulation that was coming in, the rest of the room that has been completely beat down with this shark issue, and it's not just the commercial guys, the recreational guys are getting beat up unbelievably with shark depredation. So now it's gotten to the point that, and this is where my concern is, that everybody is to the point where I don't give a fuck about sharks. And I'm like, guys, you can't look at it like that. I run a page online. We've got about, I don't know, 8,000 members, give or take. And these guys are like, kill the sharks, kill the sharks. And it's like, no, guys, that's not my position. My position is government, get off your lazy fucking ass and manage the resource. Go to Congress, recommend to whoever it is you got to recommend to. And it's funny because when this Amendment 16 came out, I'm like, have you guys figured out why you're not meeting the quota? And if you figured it out, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
And it finally got to the point where it went up the ladder. I mean, right there at the table. And it's like, we do not recommend, we do not tell Congress what they should or shouldn't do. And it's like, then what the fuck is your point of being here?
Yeah, yeah, I think they need a stronger approach. I mean, they're an advisement to the Congress. Congress can do what it wants. Um, that's the way all government works. However, when you take an end run around all of the available science behind the shark industry, behind, I mean, both recreational and commercial, when you take do an end run around all of that history and knowledge and background, all of the scientists and all the research and the dollars spent, even with the shark survey cruises that I participated on a couple of them, tremendous expense, billions of dollars, I would say, over the time, and just say no, we're not going to allow it. We're not going to allow the sale of shark fins without any legitimate reason. Um, it's going to be really hard to reverse that and to get the industry going again. The sharks, yeah, it's a difficult subject, but you have to address it. I mean, NOAA Fisheries went to tremendous detail, tremendous depth of knowledge or work to delineate the allowable harvest of each species of sharks that we were impacting. You know, the sharp nose that reproduces every year, very prolific, could sustain a larger total allowable catch than say the bull shark or the dusky shark or no, the dusky's prohibited, but I mean the other species because of their life history. But it's a complex issue, but people just don't want to don't want to address it. I think it's a really difficult subject, but and along with the drop in um, the harvest of sharks, the participation by the commercial fishery, like I said, there's like when I left the workshop program, there were only about 85 seafood dealers that had permits to purchase shark off the fishing vessels. When it started out, it was 332 or something. Um, that's a real drop in the number of places a fisherman can actually sell his product. So the whole chain has been shrunk down from the opportunity to harbor sharks to where they can sell the sharks. Uh, in order to have any kind of a recovery in industry, it just needs to be opened back up. I don't think there's a doubt that the numbers of sharks are increasing. That some of them might not be increasing like they hoped. The dusky is one of them that was over probably still quite diminished in its numbers. Some of the hammerheads are beat down in population pretty heavy because of the fishing industry. But the other species, the blacktip shark, is in wonderful shape. It's not incurring overfishing, and overfishing is not happening with that species. That's a healthy species. The sandbar appears to be increasing in numbers. We see that's the major number one shark
Culprit.
station everywhere, from the Carolinas to Texas. And I'm sure, when you're out on a boat hooked up with a big billfish, it's even the big silky sharks that are further offshore. You don't find silkies near the beach, but out there where you're fishing for the tunas and the swords and everything else, those are big silky sharks and probably tiger sharks too. So
What we're seeing here off of Palm Beach is a lot of bull sharks,
big bull sharks down there.
big bull sharks.
Yep.
We're having a lot of different interactions with them while we're catching sailfish. We also have a very unique problem in that same little stretch. The divers are feeding the sharks. So you have a very popular uh, tourist attraction of feeding the sharks. And they're the same, it's the same area that we're fishing for sailfish. And so a lot of the local guys here, they're like, "Oh, you got to ban the feeding of the sharks." And I'm like, "Listen, guys, I'm not saying that's not a problem, but that's not the problem. You're just getting them to congregate here. That's it."
Yeah, and I wouldn't consider banning the feeding of sharks, period, unless there was a number of injuries due to shark bites incidental to feeding them. I don't know if there's any number of those,
No,
but
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. But once you start to incur some injuries or even fatalities, God forbid, from that sort of thing, that's when you address the banning of it. But because it's impacting another, sport fish, recreational fishery, sailfish, or dolphin fishing, that's not a viable argument.
Yeah, I don't. Again, listen, I love the fact that you get people to fall in love with a resource.
Yeah,
Because I'm a firm believer when you fall in love with a resource, you're going to conserve it.
sure.
But the problem is when it goes a little bit too far. One of the arguments that I put on a few years ago, I helped promote a shark fishing tournament that had a harvest category to it. I think we had 98% release, 97 or 98% release. We released like 360 sharks. We harvested nine bull sharks, and oh my God, the amount of death threats I was getting,
Yeah,
it was ridiculous. The amount of death threats I was getting, and it's like, guys, it's a shark. It's a resource. It went to good use. We had the scientists there. They did all the studies they could do because of the fact that now they're able to have a carcass.
they put
Then
they don't get a chance to put hands on the
n-
shark. They do
no,
because they don't have access to the platforms, the research boats, or the anything. So they'll take advantage of that. You can't get that kind of a reaction from a snapper tournament
no, no. They had people lined up on the bridge with signs.
or a dolphin tournament. A mahi mahi El Dorado
Yeah.
kind of reaction. But with sharks, it's amazing.
Well, again, it goes back to they've humanized it. So when they feed these sharks, they take pictures of them and they've created their own Instagram pages.
But
So you have a shark that has an Instagram page. Oh, here's Joy feeding here. Here's Joy doing that. And I'm like, you do know that that is a migratory species. And now it's not migrating because you're feeding it.
yeah,
You are literally interfering with the natural progression of sharks.
migrate only because their food source migrates. So if their food source stays put, they're going to stay put.
Exactly. Why leave? Look at these funny things with glasses on with bubbles coming out of them. They give me food every day. And listen, again, I'm not mad about that. I'm not mad at all about any of it. I absolutely love it. I'm mad. It's not even mad. I'm disappointed with NOAA and the regulators that have allowed this to be humanized to the point where uh, I had this young girl. I believe she was from Minnesota. She didn't, bless her heart, and I say that in the most nice, benign way possible, because she didn't send me a death threat. She just sent me a message saying, "Listen, I live in Minnesota and I love sharks and I've never seen one, but because of people like you, I may never have the chance." And I'm like, young, again, I can't remember if her name was Melissa or Melinda. It was an M name. And I'm like, listen, there's plenty of sharks. You can come down and I'll find somebody to take you out and show you the sharks. There's not a problem. But they have made you feel that if one is removed, they're all going to die, and it's not. There's plenty of them. It's a resource. No different than snapper, grouper, or dolphin fish, or any other fish, and it just needs to be managed properly.
Exactly. And they don't receive information from very many sources that would tell them otherwise.
Correct.
They're feeding into these media sources, YouTube's, Instagrams, whatever, that just reinforces in their mind that you got to preserve all sharks, that you can't harvest them, that kind of a thing. So it's I don't know how you combat that. Media campaigns, just to educate people, um, that yes, there's sharks out there, and yes, it is okay to sustainably harvest them. They are a wonderful source of seafood, and it's just it's a shame you can't get through to them because they only listen to one really narrow segment of media exposure, and that's what they gravitate to. Oh, going to save all the sharks, and they'll keep watching YouTube's. YouTube algorithm is really interesting. You start watching something, and it lines up a whole bunch of other sources on the same bend.
Oh
Not
my gosh.
and so they just go through this rabbit trail rather than back off, reset, learn the full picture, look at the whole picture, about what's really out there in the ocean, in the real life.
In the entire space of it, and uh yeah, it's a social bubble. You
Yeah,
just keep hearing the same thing over and over and over again.
term social bubble. Yeah.
Yeah, you just, of course, sometimes I'm looking at stuff and I'm like, oh, wait a second. Step back here. Oh, yeah, yeah, I'm right. No, you ain't right, dude. You've just watched the same type of video 7 times over the last 3 days. Now, you might need to step back a little bit and search something different.
But you have to step back and look at that full picture, and it's the same with regulations. Look at everything. It's the same with even participating in the recreational fishery. Look at the whole thing. State of Florida was very proactive from the very beginning to really limit commercial fishing within state waters. Um, so they were early on very conservative on shark fishing. Uh, so I remember arguing against or making statements to FWC when they held their meetings, and because we were fishing a half mile off the beach or just outside the breakers and catching some nice big sharks, but they pushed it out to longline use out to 3 miles and really limited how many we could harvest in state waters. That was very early on,
What approximately what year was that? Was that back in the 80s or 90s?
back in the 80s.
Okay. So yeah, that's been a while.
I would say 85, 6 or 7, something like that.
For the young kids that listen, and that is my highest demographic is 18 to 24. Back in the 1900s. Uh,
Back in the 1900s.
I've had kids. Oh my God, you were born in the 1900s? I'm like, get the fuck out of here, man. I have quite a few, uh, especially young men, reach out to me. I think I have like 6 or 7 of them. They all go to college, and they've been sending me their final exam scores. I think it's great.
Cool.
Yeah, it's cool as shit. They reach out to me and they're like, "Oh man, you helped me get through college because I can listen to fishing while I'm in school." And I'm like, "Great." I go, "Hey, isn't this final exam week?" I go, "Well, how'd you do?" And they give me their scores. I'm like, "Yeah, I love it." I can't remember the scores. I can remember what they caught fishing that weekend when
There
they're
you
like, "Oh, I
go.
went fishing last weekend with my dad. I caught 3 sails in a blue marlin." I can remember he caught 3 sails in a blue marlin. I can't remember that he got an 87 on biology.
Cares about coursework.
I think it's great. Now, While you were in working with the state, um, how was the actual like when I deal with NOAA and HMS, I can see it like this overall presumption of overprotecting of sharks. I can see that. I can feel it. How was the state of Florida in that? Was the state of Florida more of a business laissez-faire, or was there a predominant lean to it one way or another?
I think the state was very conservative in its management of sharks. Like I said, very early on, they went to eliminate longline gear from state waters. Um, I don't know what they did. I don't know that they did eliminate some gill nets. They might have eliminated. There was a huge gill net fishery down off of Port Salerno.
I remember when they banned them, the amendment back in '91.
Okay, so that's when they pushed them out. So the initially was long lines, and then there was still use of gill nets for against shark or to harvest sharks. And then with the gill net ban in state waters, that pushed them outside. They targeted blacktip sharks almost exclusively. Those things form incredibly dense schools, and at times they form balls within the water column that just circle around, and they would spot those from the plane and wrap those up. But the state was very proactive, conserving sharks very early on. Um, and we just didn't understand it, but we complied with it. From my perspective, it pushed me from fishing just outside the breakers for the big bulls and all the cool stuff to outside 3 miles. There were still a lot of black tips and things between 3 and 6 miles, so I didn't really care. Just made me run farther, but um, it was if I encountered regulations or if regulations were imposed that were counterproductive for me, I just went a different direction and did something slightly different. I just continued on, figured a way to make things work rather than fight the regime or fight the machine. Just okay, I can't fish in state waters. I'll just go out to 3.1 miles. There's a lot of sharks there, and I'll fish there. So that's the way we operated in the early days.
But 3.1, even 3 miles is not that far.
No, it's not that far at all.
No, it really is. I mean, when you yesterday I was talking with somebody that fishes out of Massachusetts. They're going like 135 miles one way to get to blue water.
No,
3 miles is a cakewalk.
where you are, it's beautiful water here. Our continental shelf up here is 45 miles offshore. So, but we're still at 3 miles. We're in 60 feet, 65 feet of water.
That's not bad.
Really good environment. Well, it's mostly sand bottom up here with a few rock outcroppings. And so, but it's still a good shark territory.
How long were your long lines back then, when you were doing it full time?
Uh, Full time, I owned and operated two vessels. One was a 32-foot boat. That was just 3 miles of line. And then
Okay.
I just eventually in 1990, I purchased another vessel, let my brother run the first one. First boat's name, by the way, was Jawsome.
Jawsome.
That's our first boat.
You knew where your money was made.
We were having fun. We named it Jawsome. Everything was awesome on the Jawsome.
Oh my God, that's great.
I would fish 6 to 8 miles on my second boat. It had a regular big longline spool. It was set up for grouper fishing in the Gulf, but there was a big decline in the fishery in around 1980 or 1990. When was yeah around late 80s 90s there was a big decline in the grouper fishery. My boat was a prototype for a boat company that wanted to produce a whole line of these longline boats, 40-foot longline boats, and just um, yeah, I purchased it, fished it over here. So it's 6 to 8 miles. If I was targeting small coastal sharks, I would fish about 2 miles and I would jam 800 hooks on 2 miles a year.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's a lot of fucking hooks.
Oh,
That's a lot of hooks in 2 miles.
a lot of hooks in 2 miles, but those sharks travel in pretty dense schools, and
Yeah.
we could if we made 2 sets of gear, we'd be home with a really nice catch. But it was brutal on the hands for carpal tunnel and all that stuff. So, but yeah, you had to do what you had to do.
No, it's fishing. That's people don't understand especially long lining. It's factory fishing.
A typical set for me was I would leave the dock in the evening, late afternoon, evening, depending on where I wanted to run. My crew would cut up the bait. We would get all the hooks pre-baited. My gangents, a leader, and hook and clip were about 6 feet long.
Okay.
And we would run out to where I thought that we would be able to catch some sharks where I hadn't fished before, just to get fresh ground. And then we would start setting the gear, put a heavyweight buoy at one end, and just drive away from it with the hydraulics and free spool. And every 100 feet or so, 150 feet, put a clip on there. Our line was weighted down to the bottom. It wasn't pelagic or floating. We weighted it down to the bottom because that's where the sharks mostly swim. They cruise along the bottom, cruising. And then just drive in a straight line. I usually tried to drive it, set it across the current so that you lay your line out and the current's coming this way, and it's just letting that scent go all the way down. The sharks could follow that scent all the way up to the hooks. And we would just drop it down and cut it free from the boat, anchor it up. We'd anchor up, and at daylight, we'd start the process of haulback.
Okay.
Start to reverse the whole process, hook it up to the hydraulics and tie it up, and just start retrieving it one hook at a time. And you either had a fish or you didn't. And it was, when you got into them, it was pretty cool. You could look down the line when the water was clear. You could look down the line and see 2 or 3 fish stacked up as waiting to come up to you.
Were most of them dead by the time you got there?
But depending on the species,
Okay.
the black tip shark, which I targeted a lot, is a more active fish, and I think it probably requires more oxygen than the others. They were usually dead.
Okay.
So they were laying on the bottom, and they were usually dead. If we had things like tigers or sandbars, they were very much alive. Nurse sharks, they're always alive. But sandbars were always alive. Tigers were always alive. But if I had a black tip or a spinner, those are usually dead. Silkies offshore, they'd be alive to some extent. Your smaller coastal species, sharp nose, black nose, fine tooth, they, depending on how long the soak was and when they bit the hook, they could be alive or dead. But even if they were deceased or dead on haulback, we could still dress them out, bleed them, completely remove the kidney up against the backbone, and then they'd still be a good product. I kept my fish in a seawater ice slush. It cooled them down much quicker, brought their body temperature down, but it also helped drain the blood out of all the pores along the not the pores, the blood vessels where the kidney had attached. Where the blood system went into the kidney. You cut the tail off, you expose a large vein right there. So our sharks were always well bled because I kept them in seawater ice slush. And I was a 2-day boat. I rarely stayed out for more than 3 nights. If I couldn't find enough fish for a harvest in 2 nights, I needed to come in and regroup. And so I was always usually fairly close to the beach, within 20 miles. It was just a few hours steam back to the dock. I only did 7.5 knots. And, we could unload, regroup, and figure out where to go from there. Not every time did we catch a boatload of sharks. Sometimes we'd set all that gear and have 4 or 5 fish. It's like,
Oh,
like, where are they now? And so, but usually most of the time we could pull out a trip that was worth going for.
wow. What?
Sometimes we'd
Uh,
have sometimes we'd have too many sharks and have to call in a neighboring boat. Say, help me pull my gear in. I remember that one time we went out and set our gear. I had a borrowed deckhand. It was not my usual guy. And we set this gear and we started getting into these sandbar sharks. And the capacity on my boat was about 5,000 pounds. That's when I maxed out. Um, and we just loaded the boat, and there was still quarter of the gear to pull up. And so I called another boat in and gave those fish to him.
Now, when you did something like that, did you still catch them, or did you just give him your line and let him retrieve your line?
I let him retrieve my line.
Okay.
He rolled it up on his spool, and I let him have those fish.
Okay.
I got my gear back, but I let him have those fish. I was
Okay.
I was happy. I mean,
Yeah. No.
1,000 pounds of fish in a 24-hour period. I think that was a $8,800 stock for that trip. I was happy.
Yeah. No, listen, that's a good pull.
That was a good pull.
That's a really good pull. On average, when you set something like that, how long would it take you to, let's say on an app with not completely loaded with sharks, but not completely empty? How long would it take you to retrieve all your gear?
If I had no fish, it'd be about 2 hours, 3 hours
Okay, that's not too bad.
for thing. But if I had a load of fish like that, it could be 12 or 15 hours. Just because you have to stop and work through when you get a large sandbar up to the side, it's alive. You got to, we used, we used a handgun to euthanize the shark at beside the boat for our safety so that we didn't, when you're hauling them in, you don't want to deal with you don't want to wrestle or wrangle a shark. So we euthanized them, just a quick shot, top of the head. All it did was a 22, and that's what we did. And then get them in the boat. So every shark that we got, we had to deal with that. And we usually, when that was happening, we'd have to stop every now and then and just dress up everything that we had on the deck and then get it into our slush, our ice, to maintain the quality of the product. I was always very concerned about quality of product. I wanted my sharks to be as pristine or as good a product as possible. I really valued them as a good product to bring in. I wasn't just fishing them to make money. I cared about what kind of quality I brought to the dock. Didn't make much difference. The buyers took them whether they were limp noodles or stiff logs.
Yeah.
It would take a while to process those larger sharks, and so we would just hang there on the line, let it free spool a little bit as we drifted in the breeze, and we clean up the deck and then go back and get everything in the ice, and then go back to hauling gear. So it it could take as much as 12 or 14 hours to haul back sometimes.
Wow.
And that's you,
You're making money.
you deal with what you're dealt with.
Yeah, no, I mean listen, there's something to be said about taking care of your product, whatever it is, whether you're catching sharks commercially, snapper commercially, or if you're doing recreationally and you catch a Dorado, you want to get them on ice,
Get them
you
on.
want to you want to take care of them because it 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 reflects in the quality of what you're eating.
Yeah. No, it didn't, when it came down to it, I don't think it really made much of a difference from the seafood buyer's perspective. But I always wanted to bring the best I could to the dock. There were many boats that would just deck load those things and until they were piled high overhead, and then they would dress them out or gut them on the way home. They were limp noodles, already sunburned and stuff, but
Uh,
was just a real, it wasn't a very good representation of the for the marketplace or for the industry to bring crap like that in. I'm sorry, stuff
yeah,
like that.
well, no, you can curse on here. Listen, that's why I try to purposely throw a couple F-bombs in there to let you know we're good.
Well, I don't normally speak that way. So
Yeah, listen, it's okay. I was I talked to a friend of mine. I don't want to get too I let it fly sometimes. Don't worry. No
Well,
pun intended.
oh, yeah,
Yeah, I'm not gonna judge you. And there's only one person that judges around here, and the good Lord knows that I sprinkle it around a little bit like seasoned salt. Uh, so no, you got to take care of your product, and you also got to take care of your boat. When you start getting too many of these carcasses all over the place, sliding everywhere, it's not good for the fishermen. It's not good for the fish. It's not good for anything.
yeah. My boat was small. My deck space was fairly small, even though it was a 40 footer. It was designed for grouper fishing, not for shark fishing, but I made it work. But I
Yeah,
couldn't have many sharks on the back deck. It had a narrow beam to it, so it didn't have a lot of buoyancy. So I could overload it really easily. It was easier just to process them as they came up. Take as long as you could. If they're sandbars, they're down there. They're still alive. There's no problem with them.
yeah. Now, you said you used just a regular handgun. Had you ever considered using a bang stick? And this is just for my personal curiosity.
No, I didn't because both boats I had overheads, which would mean I would need to try to manipulate
Okay.
a long stick. So it was just easier to have to go down to the pawn shop and, and buy a real cheap 22. Um, you don't need a 45. You don't need a shotgun. In fact, shotguns got a lot of people in trouble with quality of the meat. But no, all you need to do is to stun the shark in the area of the brain, the top of the head, between the eyes, and once you did that, you immobilized them, and you could handle them very safely. Put hand gaffs into their corner of their mouth and bring them up on deck. Make the spinal cord cut right behind the skull, and that would really disengage the tail, so they really couldn't thrash at all. No, and at that time, 22 shells were really cheap, like 3 cents a piece. So I gave him a vitamin lead pill. That's all I gave him.
Uh, and my reason for asking the question is because of the shark depredation problem we're having now. I'm seeing more and more vigilantes out there.
Yeah.
And I know of two instances, friends of mine, that have gotten ricochets through their salon windows.
Okay.
And and mainly because most people that don't know what they're doing, they're not getting the fish straight up and down, head out of the water. They're probably trying to shoot him while he's still underneath, and next thing you know, you got you got lead skipping across for a mile.
Yeah. No. When you bring a large shark up, if you hold the gangin up a certain way, at some point he's going to level out rather than just be head up and tail down. He's going to level out and he's going to give you a flat shot on top of the head.
Okay.
And really, it was real easy just to wait for a moment or two for that instance to happen, and then get in and just pop them real easy. And we did that for our safety. These large sharks, um, when you're bringing them up by they're called box hooks. They're 30-inch long box hooks with a T handle and a gaff hook on one end, meant for dragging wooden crates around the fish house with. We found them perfect for putting in the corner of the mouth and pulling them up on deck with. I had a gin pole with a large hook on it as well, but we saved that for the really large sharks that we couldn't get up with one person. But two people pulling a big sandbar up, we could get it. But what the sandbar would do is he would push his tail back against the boat and kind of cause some resistance. And so it was easier just to make him go limp and then pull him in that way.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Safer for everybody, and it's quick. It's quick for the shark.
Quick for the shark. Yep. Just
Yeah.
catch him really quick.
Yeah, no, that's uh in the long run, anytime you can put an animal out of its misery as quick as possible.
As would use a shotgun. And especially one particular boat, it was a much larger boat, a 65 footer, and they were quite a ways off the water, probably 5, 6 feet. The deck was 5, 6 feet off the water, really large platform. And they went to using a shotgun. Well, the pellets would scatter throughout.
Everywhere.
It would enter the hit and scatter down. And so there was a problem coming back. Some of the shark product got shipped out to Colorado, Utah, some of the western states, and they were finding lead pellets in the meat, actually in the restaurants.
Oh
Somebody would
my gosh.
somebody would eat, be eating and encounter a lead pellet from shotgun. So that quickly got back to the fishermen. Hey, don't do that or whatever. So, but so that was just the crazy. Who'd have thought that a pellet would travel all the way down the body of the shark? But anyway, that's what happened.
No, it's
And I
fun. It's funny how shit travels.
I always use a small caliber because, well, you have an overhead. Um, the noise
Oof.
is minimized that way. I had a buddy who always, he was a colleague of mine. We were docked right next to each other, and he always wanted to do the biggest and the bestest and the baddest. So he went and got him a stainless 45 revolver. Oh, I'm gonna get him now. This is going to get him. So he had a roof over his deck. He went he went to shoot that first shark. He about deafened himself.
Oh
It
my God.
reverberated, but it reverberated between the roof and the deck.
Oh my God. By the end of a trip, nobody can talk to each other. Everybody on your vessel's deaf.
It was hilarious the way he was telling it. But yeah, that's standard practice was for most of us small guys was to euthanize him before.
So you you left shark fishing, you went for the state, and then at which point did you start creating those fish ID? What I'm
I
assuming you saw a problem and you wanted to create a solution.
So I started when I started doing shark identification charts back when I was still fishing and working with these law enforcement training sessions. And so to give them some reference material to remember the session we talked about, I started creating these little charts. Not so, quite so little, but full page charts
Yeah.
to identify, go through the step-by-step process to do the identification. That way they could go back, they could have it in their clipboard and they could say, okay, this and this, you follow this, and this is how you get to identify a fine-tooth shark. So that started back when I was fishing. When I started with the state, we had a department that had 60 or 70 personnel in it from all around the state, from Pensacola to Fernandina Beach, all charged with identifying fish and identifying sharks and recording the data from them. It's important to get the data correct, to get the identification of the fish correct, because if there's because of the way that the data was extrapolated to calculate an estimate of harvest. What we collected in data was used to estimate the harvest of each species of fish. If you have a misidentification of a particular shark, for instance, the way it's extrapolated could mean there might be 500 sharks estimated to have been harvested of that one species based on that data collection. Well, there were instances where I went into the MERS database and queried it to see what species were harvested and where. And there were species being estimated harvested from Florida inland waters that were impossible because the identification of that shark had been not correct. So I began recognizing there's a problem with our methodology and training in shark identification. So I began writing even more detailed charts on how to identify the different shark species and giving them to our field staff. And that's that was beneficial. I started producing materials and putting them in the field kits for each of our field staff that had availability to do that resource. I came in with a ton of shark identification experience and knowledge, and I was always like a go-to guy. Hey, Eric, what's this species of shark? They would send me a picture. I do that to this day. I'm sent pictures from FWC. What do you think this shark species is? I get pictures from law enforcement. What do you think this shark species is? And so that's how I impacted or was able to help FWC. And so some of that material is to this day is on FWC's website, especially under um, the shark fishing section. You'll see my identification charts that are up there. I did them under my time with FWC under their time, so it's their material. I just created for them. But then, so that started then, and that was I would do training sessions with them. We would get together once a year to have statewide meeting. We had NOAA Fisheries required us to come together and receive 2 or 3 days of training and all different types of things. And that was oftentimes one of the topics was shark identification. And so I started producing, like I showed you, these little cards, and I would make these. I started these in 2010, so I was well into my career with FWC. I would make these little cards and give them to field staff, and then I developed this identification product
Okay.
and full chart of 21 of the most common species of sharks. And so they began using this. And to this day, they still use this. When I left FWC, I gifted FWC the rights to use and reproduce this chart as they need.
Okay.
So for both for field biology and for law enforcement, both divisions, I gave them the rights to use this. Without selling it to them, I saw the value of them having good materials to manage the resource, both on data collection and for enforcement. So um, they have use of that these days.
I'm assuming you retain the rights to reproduce it for the general public.
I do. I
Okay.
do. This is my second version. This is actually a waterproof version. I've updated it. It now includes another species of shark that wasn't in the first version, but I retained sole use to it. I just gave them the rights to reproduce it for use within their agency, within their division.
Yeah. Listen, you did a lot of work in there, and uh,
I
it
recognize I recognize the need for good identification to be able to manage the resource properly. Whether it's through enforcement actions, I mean, you get an average fish and wildlife field officer going out there, he's not going to know what shark it is, but through repeated training and use of this material, he's going to know. And if they have one of these in their clipboard or this little card in their clipboard, it makes their job easier, and they don't, it makes them look a lot more professional. It's better off. And
oof.
then if our field staff, the Fish and Wildlife Research Institute field staff has these resources in their clipboards when they go do a boat side survey or a charter boat survey that has a shark, it's better to get the data correct, get the identification correct, and apply it to the right species when you do the data extrapolations.
The average person, where can they find them?
Um, these small cards are available in many of the tackle stores around.
Okay.
I produce a set of the three cards that are sold on Amazon. So just look up Tackle Box ID on Amazon. So I do sell those on Amazon, and I don't have a direct website,
No,
right?
no, no, no. I was just curious. here's an argument that I have with not just NOAA, FWC, HMS. Government officials like to put it in the official registry just to
Yep.
say, yeah, we put it out to everybody. No, 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 no. You got to make this shit readily available. And things aren't readily available. So it's not so much that I'm asking if you have a website or not. I want to make sure not just the government, but people have access to information. It's one of the things that I like. One of the arguments that I had, it wasn't even an argument. It's just, hey, a recommendation. Last year in 2025, they had to cut our quota in half for
Yep.
bluefin tuna. And the reason behind it was because we went over our bluefin tuna quota in 2024. And all these people, all these bluefin tuna fishermen in the Northeast, how come you're cutting our quota in half when we just had the greatest season of our life? Bluefin tuna are back, and you're cutting us in half.
Because
And yeah, what are you doing? You guys are idiots. And it's like, guys, if you would have taken the time, however much money and effort you put into cutting the retention limit in half, if you would have used 10% of that and just said, ladies and gentlemen of the fishing public, the reason we're doing that is because of the fact of our agreement with ICAT. If we go over by 50%, we have to give it back. So that's why we're cutting the retention limit in half. And most people would have said, oh, I didn't realize that. They don't realize this. And if you just communicate with people and just explain it to them, I don't have children, but most people have children. When your child does something wrong and you explain to him, listen, the reason why I don't want you running out in the street is because you could get hit by a car. Oh, well, that makes sense. Instead of my mom and dad hate me and they don't want me playing in the street.
NOAA Fisheries has a history of being very, very poor in communications.
Yeah.
A long, it, it is not in the federal mindset to to do that kind of a thing. It's not in the federal mindset to say, listen, guys, your quota, here's your quota. Um, Stretch it out a little bit. Uh, the fishermen are going to say, man, it's gangbusters here. Let's go get them. Let's get them while they're here.
Yeah.
That they're going to overharvest. The other thing is the time frame of the reporting system. If it's a long interval between reports, then you're going to overharvest.
Yeah.
So Noah went with regards to HMS and sharks. They went from a 2 week paper reporting system now to a weekly reporting system. This was quite a while back. They went to that, and that helped manage those over harvesting, so to limit the over harvesting. If you do a more timely updating of the totals, you don't get into that over harvest situation. So obviously somebody wasn't looking at the bluefin tuna numbers as they were accumulating and getting the word out to say, hey guys, you're at 80%. You need to slow down a little bit here, or you're going to over harvest. Nobody was watching that. They just boom allowed it to happen. The same thing happened in the shark industry years back in the Gulf of Mexico. At one point, the Gulf and the Atlantic were managed in the same quota for large coastal sharks. And Louisiana area, they just gangbustered a ton of sharks. And it was the 2 week paper reporting system, and people were just harvesting and harvesting and harvesting. The fish houses were buying and buying and buying. And then Noah said, "Oh, I think we've met our quota. I think it'll be quota. We're going to shut it down." And all the dealers cleaned up the paperwork that was stuck on their desk that hadn't been taken care of, and another 300 metric tons or whatever it was
Oh my God.
applied to what was harvested. Well, that was subtracted from the following year. just like in the case with the bluefish, subtracted in the following year, and everybody's like, how can this be? So a large part of it has to do with the timeliness of the reporting and the timeliness of the analysis of the data, but also a warning: hey, you're at 80%, you're at 85%, you're at 90%. It's coming up. Slow it down.
Yeah, it's
Kind of a,
especially with the technology we have nowadays,
right.
it's not hard.
It all starts with the initial reports. The the fisherman has to send in their reports in a timely manner. I remember when I had my HMS reports, I didn't do it in a timely manner. I'm guilty of that. But it's still as important to be done in a timely manner to be properly managed. The fish house has to do it in a timely manner. And then once it gets sent up to the Science Foundation, Science Center, they've got to look at it in a timely manner rather than just let it accumulate and be too busy with something else. So everybody has to stay on top of their job in order to properly manage these the harvest levels of these fish, whether it's tunas or whether it's sharks.
Listen, whatever it is, it needs to be, everything has to be timely because it's happening in real time.
It's happening in real time, and then if there's an overharvest, there's real consequences.
Yeah, there really is. And you got to pay it back.
Yep,
You,
and not just the human consequences by paying it back, and then maybe an increased period of idleness because you can't harvest fish because the opening is delayed, or because of the harm on the population stock itself.
exactly. I never realized what, I don't know what a better word than nightmare, fish management is. It's hard. Uh, I,
Fishermen think about it doing it with a perspective of, okay, sailfish, that's a one species management issue. Swordfish, one species management issue. Try
yeah,
there's probably 40 different ones. Well, there's 38 in the fisheries management plan, but 25 of them are really common here off the coast of Florida. Try doing it in that respect.
yeah, it's not easy.
And then you try to aggregate some of them together, large coastal, small coastals, hammerheads, and you make the aggregates of that. It's not entirely easy. So it's a difficult problem. But back to the original statement, I know whether it's snapper, grouper fishing, or anything else, there's very little communication from the managers about those kind of things.
Yeah, and the public, and we've all done it. We are so used to getting up to the minute information whenever we need it, and we like it. I mean, when was the last time you made a large purchase, a boat, a car, or something, and you haven't researched everything online? I want to know how many miles per gallon I get, how often I got to change my tires. You want every bit of information you get before you do it. And here we are in fisheries, and getting information is almost like extracting teeth,
Yeah, it
you
is.
know?
And
It's
it's important for supply chain too. It's important to say for if Noah could come out and say, okay, look, here are the updates. Now, to their credit, Noah Fisheries does periodically put out landing updates on the different categories of sharks: large coastal, small coastal, pelagics. And this is important because even in the supply chain, not only for the fishermen, how much more time do I think I have? I can go out to harvest, but for the retailer, how much longer does Publix think they will be able to get this, shark product that they can sell? Are they going to have to start looking towards an alternate product at some point? That kind of a thing. So it's the whole supply chain issue as well. Fishermen, am I going to have to switch over to a different species, a different target? In 6 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever.
Yeah, no, it's management,
And
management of the resource that you're trying to sell.
NOAA does it the bare minimum. They'll put out a statement. Here's what it is, and then they'll say Uh, it is estimated that by so and so on midnight, so and so will have reached the quota and the fishery will be shut down. And that's like, what? I was just planning on making a trip.
I've received a lot of those emails. I've received what's today, May 15th or 16th. Uh, we're planning on shutting it down May 17th at 11:59 p.m.
Oh, how am I going to get a trip in 36 hours?
This is something they were talking about this trip because they've created these restricted fishing days, RFDs, for the bluefins. Well, what happens if you hook and catch your bluefin at 11:30 at night and you're offshore?
Yeah.
And that's what they were saying. And listen, you got a valid point. You caught it on a legal day,
I,
but the
actually, you hooked it on a legal day.
yeah, even if you caught it on the legal day at 11, you put it in the boat at 11:30, you're not getting back to the dock by midnight. Now what? Well, the fish house can't take it, you know? And I'm like, oh my God, I never thought of that. I there's so many things. It's what do they call it? The butterfly effect. One little thing right here can affect something so far down the line.
And that's from fishery managers who work in an office and don't realize all the nuances that happen on a boat, such as hooking up and getting a big fish on the deck at 11:30 at night and having a 4 hour steam into the fish house when you're technically now in violation because you have in possession or landing a fish after the closure.
Oh,
You know, there has to be some understanding. Like my former deckhand went on to be with Noah Fisheries. He's since left the business, but you know, it's good to have people in the management field who have had deck experience, so they can know these.
they understand it. They understand those little nuances that happen in a world that doesn't always play nice. It's never a straight line when it
Black
comes to fishing.
for them, it's black and white. For Noah, it's black and white. For
Yeah.
black and white.
And here's the thing. Let's just say fish management, because it's not just NOAA. It's, you got the South Atlantic councils, you got all these councils, you got states that deal with it. And listen, they do the best with what they got, but there's always room for improvement.
There is,
Yeah, there's always, and that's even in the private sector. Private sector. It's not just the government sector. There's always room for improvement.
and I think part of it is that there's a disconnect um, in the federal fisheries management sector where the managers, the people, just don't have any connection with the fishermen, and they don't really, their decisions have a huge impact on the fishermen, but they don't have any connection to them, and so it doesn't bother them that they just go in for a 9 to 5 job and make a decision and go home. Um, their decisions have huge implications on the whole sectors of fisheries, but they don't care. It comes across as if they don't care. Um, less communication. If there were more communication between the managers and the fishermen, how do we make this better? What do you need to know? What's going on? It looks like you're coming up on a quota closure. What can we do to help you or understand? That are just it's just it's black and white. They make a decision, they publish it. That's it, and that's it. That's done. And that's with every sector of federal fisheries, whether it be shrimp or whether it be sharks or whether it be snapper grouper.
Yeah.
I know I have a friend who had the snapper grouper unlimited commercial permit, and he missed his reapplication by a day or two because he was consumed with the death of a parent and overwhelmed by taking care of that. And you think that they would let him reapply and get his old permit back? No, he lost it forever.
Wow.
Now he had to go to the 200 pound, 250 pound daily limit instead of the unlimited commercial that he had.
How long did he have the unlimited?
He had it forever. He'd
Oh my
had
God.
had it forever on his boat. But because he simply forgot the deadline period, they had no personality or ability to say, "Wow, yes, sir, Captain, I see you've maintained this for 15 or 20 years, and we'll accept your explanation of what happened." And no, they locked him out. So
Ugh.
just so cold, you know. HMS and NOAA in all sectors comes across as being just so cold towards working with fishermen. It'd be great if it'd be like you and I are talking and we could hash out an issue and have some understanding that is kind of collaborative and kind of give and take, but there's no give and take really on any of these.
That's human nature is give and take.
Yeah,
It's I I don't know. For me, uh I'm really big on communication. Somebody calls me up and says, "Hey man, I'm having this issue. Can you work with me?" Here's the thing. I can't always work with you, but sometimes there's something that can be done. I want to do this. I don't want to hear it as dock rumor. I
yeah.
want to hear it as you you know. Don't just call me up and say, "Hey, we got a fish." Wait a second, that's not the boat you registered on.
Yeah.
We blew an engine. I go, you didn't fucking tell me that. If you call me up and say, "Hey, I blew an engine," okay, you need to move to a different boat. Okay, listen, I want you to go fishing,
Yeah.
but just not calling me uh, after the fact. You know what? I had a guy, and he did right. He did right by me. He called me up and he says, "Hey, I caught a fish. I don't know if it's a spearfish or a blue marlin."
Uh,
And I said, "This is what I'm gonna do." I said, "I'm gonna put it down as a blue marlin." And he goes, "Yeah, but I don't know." I says, "That's fine." I says, "You come in, you show me your video, and it's easier for me to take points away from you
yeah.
than hey, I put it down as a spearfish and uh, it ended up being a blue marlin. Man, if I got to add points to you at the end of the day, that's a fucking nightmare, you know? So this is what I'm going to do. And we looked at the video and okay, we're good. We subtracted the points. Psst, easy peasy. You call me up, we'll address the problem accordingly.
Yep.
You know, no harm, no foul. Man, if somebody's looking at second place and they just got bumped to fourth because I got to give you points, no, it's hard.
A lot of money issues right there. You're going to get a lot of people angry.
Yeah, call me up.
Yep.
Let's figure out a solution or in a way to address it. You know, I'd rather give you more points now and then take it away at the end of the day. No harm, no foul. At the end of the day, I had more people happy than upset. You know, even the guy that, you know, misidentified the species, he was okay because he knew, you know, the shaky ground he was in. But as opposed to pulling money out of somebody's pocket, ooh. Eric, I asked you for 2 hours of your time, and we're coming up on the 2 hours. So I would like to say thank you so much for your time. This was great, and as this goes forward, I'd possibly like the ability to bring you on again some other time.
Well, I can't believe it's been 2 hours, but I've enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah.
With hashing out a lot of stuff. We haven't even gotten into the depredation issue and all that those sort of things. We could,
No, I say let's regroup in a few weeks, in a few months, and let's do it again. There's we had a recreational fishing roundtable, and one of the topics was depredation. The number two topic was depredation. So the administration is pushing for this, and maybe once they start implementing some of these things, they have not implemented anything yet. They're just letting us know that they're looking to implement some ideas. So maybe once they start implementing it, it's something that maybe you and I can come back around and talk about some of the ideas.
Let's see what they do about the sandbar issue, whether and what they're going to do with that.
So, just so you know, they're in the middle of a stock assessment,
Right.
and I believe they're going to come up with a stock assessment by 27.
Okay.
So at least that's what was discussed this week. So let's see what comes out. And then also with this Amendment 16, I think it would be a good topic for you and I to talk about again. I really enjoyed number one, getting to know you and catch up. And I would like the ability to have you on again and discuss with somebody that's actually been in the field and on both sides, not just as a commercial fisherman, but you are also with the state and the regulatory. So I think you bring a very unique perspective to the conversation, and you know what it's like to be a regulator, and you know what it's like to be the actual guy on the water trying to earn a living, you know?
Not, and I haven't been a legislator, at least not with fisheries. I am with I own with my city. I'm on city council, so I have wear that hat. But I've seen both. I can see both sides of it. You know, the
Yeah,
need for good data, and then how it impacts the fishery. You know, that
yeah.
so
And I got to give a big shout out and thank you to Nick and Haley for introducing me.
yeah, that's pretty cool. I like those guys. They're doing a good job.
Yeah, Haley just reached out to me the other day. She actually spoke in the public comment section of HMS.
Yep.
So I didn't realize she was listening. I'm like, did you listen all day long? I heard when you said blank, 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 and I'm like, oh shit. I forget that there's people online listening, and I again and here's the funny part. I have a recreational background. That's where I made my living, but. I know what it's like to make a living off of fishing, and I feel that our commercial guys they're getting shellacked. And I've had several commercial guys reach out to me, and they're like, "Man, I really appreciate you sticking up for us." And I'm like, "Hey, man, first of all, we're U.S. fishermen. We're fishermen as a whole. We got to stick together. I make fishing taking people out. You make fishing sell. You make money selling fish, but it doesn't. They've done a really good job. Whether it's the legislation or the regulatory body or the environmentalists trying to put the commercial and the rec guys against each other, and really it shouldn't be. It should be a very hand in hand working together.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's always been commercial against recreational, recreational against commercial because of perceived. The people don't understand. People just don't fully understand the issues and how the allotments are set out. And they don't fully understand. Recreational doesn't fully understand what commercial has to abide by as far as limits and harvests and things like that. So there's just very little understanding between the two, and there's very little opportunity to reach out to get that to where they're understanding each other.
Yeah. I listen, and with the depredation guys, in the rec side when they're talking about the depredation issue, I'm like, listen, guys, the only people that are going to save us is the commercial guys. This is not us going out and harvesting a shark every time we go fishing. That's not going to do it. We have to help these guys get their market back so that they can make a living
Right.
and they can manage the resource. This isn't a cull issue. This is a resource issue. How do you manage a resource? And once you get that figured out, we're all good.
So we need to get President Trump's ear to lobby him to reverse Senate Bill 1106, right? To get the ability to sell the fins back as an option for the commercial guys. Well, if you do that, you're going to open the industry back up, and then there will be more participants in it. You may be able to get more permitted dealers to purchase a product from the fishermen, but you're at least going to make it easier for the commercial fisherman to capitalize on all of the product that he harvests, and he'll be more interested in going back into that. It'll be much more worth his while to go after sharks than it is currently. And so that's going to take an executive order. I don't think anything short of that's going to work. Not within the time frame that's needed to address some of these issues.
There, you heard it from the man himself. Eric, hold on one second. I want to say thank you for joining me. Everybody that's listening, thank you so much for your time today. I know this is a very touchy subject, so I'm glad we were able to talk about it. And we will check everybody later.